Imagine a Japan where traditional wooden homes stood for generations, a testament to the country's rich history and cultural heritage. Fast forward to today, and you'll find a stark contrast. A landscape filled with temporary houses designed to last just 30 years. While this shift has seemingly solved Japan's housing crisis, it raises questions that hit close to home, literally. What are the economic repercussions of abandoning rural areas? What's the environmental cost of this disposable housing culture? And with the majority flocking to earthquake-prone cities, are we setting the stage for a disaster? Let's peel back the layers of why Japan's housing solution is a house of cards. In the early years, Japan's housing was deeply rooted in its culture and tradition, with most people living in single-family homes made of timber. These wooden homes were more than just structures. They symbolized the Japanese way of life. The architecture of these homes evolved over various periods, reflecting the materials and technology available at the time. For instance, during the Jomon period, around 300 BC, the most ancient type of dwelling was the pit house. These were simple, labor-intensive structures made by digging a level pit into the earth to support poles that held up a thatched roof. As time progressed, interaction with the Chinese Han Dynasty led to advancements in Japanese architecture, including the construction of elevated houses during the Yayoi period around 300 AD. These houses were initially used as granaries, but were soon adapted as homes, offering protection from heat, humidity, floods, and pests. The shift in housing styles was also influenced by various architectural styles that emerged during different periods in Japan. For example, the Heian period from 794 to 1185 introduced the Shinden-zukuri style, which later influenced other styles like Shoin-zukuri. The Shoin-zukuri style became the foundation for modern Japanese residential houses and was initially meant for Zen monks to read books. It later evolved into reception or meeting rooms for guests in the mansions of the military elite. This style emphasized minimal decoration and made use of sliding doors or walls and tatami mats, making it a compact dwelling option. The change in housing styles was not just a result of economic growth and urban expansion. It was also a response to various challenges. For instance, the lack of wood due to deforestation led to the use of lower quality and more abundant materials. This was particularly true for the Shoin-zukuri style, which became more prominent among the military class due to the loss of income forced on the aristocracy. However, as Japan's economy began to grow and urban areas expanded, the government stepped in to provide public housing. This led to the emergence of multiple unit buildings, which were either owned by individuals or corporations and rented out as apartments. These multi-unit dwellings began to replace the traditional single-family homes, especially in urban areas. By 1990, only 60% of Japanese dwellings were single-family homes, a significant drop from 77% in 1958. What sets Japan apart from other countries is its unique approach to housing lifespan. In most countries, houses are built to last, often for several generations. In contrast, Japanese houses are presumed to have a limited lifespan. Wooden buildings are generally torn down after 20 years, and concrete buildings after 30. This practice is so established in the culture that renovating houses is relatively uncommon. However, this approach has led to some unintended consequences. One of the most glaring issues is the high rate of housing vacancies. In 2008, around 7.56 million houses were empty, and by 2019, approximately 13.6% of buildings in Japan were vacant. This isn't just a number, it's a symptom of a deeper issue. Cities like Tokyo are already densely populated, and the influx of people increases issues like traffic congestion, pollution, and waste management. Public services like healthcare and education come under pressure as they try to accommodate the growing population. Another unique aspect of Japan's housing market is the cost. In the 1980s, a new home in Japan cost 5 to 8 times the annual income of the average Japanese person, compared to 2 to 3 times that of an average American. The loan terms for buying a house were also different. Japanese homes typically had a 20-year loan term with a 35% down payment, while in the US, it was 30 years and 25%. These financial practices made it challenging for many people to own homes, pushing them towards more temporary housing options. According to recent sources, 4 major Japanese banks have announced they will raise their 10-year fixed housing loan rates for the 3rd following month. This will likely make home ownership even more impossible for the average Japanese citizen. The high cost and rigid loan terms create a cycle where people are forced into temporary housing solutions. They can't afford to buy, so they rent. And because they rent, they can't save enough to buy. It's a loop that's hard to break out of, and it has long-term implications for financial security and wealth accumulation. Japan's temporary housing strategy, designed to solve immediate housing crises, has far-reaching consequences that are often overlooked. One of the most significant impacts is on the environment. The constant cycle of building and demolishing homes every 30 years takes a toll on natural resources and contributes to waste. This is not just about the materials used in construction. It's also about the energy consumed in the process. Building a house requires energy for everything, from manufacturing construction materials to transporting them and the actual construction work. When a house is demolished, all that energy investment is essentially wasted. The environmental cost also extends to the decontamination of houses and farmland, particularly in areas affected by natural disasters. For instance, the cost of decontaminating houses and farmland in Fukushima alone is around $50 billion. This involves not just the removal of contaminated soil, but also the disposal of waste, which can be both expensive and environmentally damaging. The waste often ends up in landfills, contributing to soil and water pollution. Moreover, the constant construction and demolition cycle increases the demand for new materials, leading to more mining and deforestation, which in turn affects biodiversity and contributes to climate change. Japan's strategy of focusing on temporary housing in urban areas has had a profound impact on its rural communities and agricultural sector. As people flock to cities like Tokyo, small towns are left to wither, losing their economic vitality. This urban migration has had a cascading effect on agriculture, which is already grappling with natural hazards. According to Japan's disaster risk management system, these hazards pose a significant threat to national security, including the agricultural sector. Vulnerability assessments have revealed that many agricultural reservoirs are falling apart and are improperly maintained, increasing flood damage in downstream areas during heavy rains. The shift away from rural areas also impacts the traditional agricultural practices that have been the backbone of Japan's food supply. But with fewer people to maintain these practices, there's a chance of decline not only in agriculture, but also in a loss of income. The country already imports about 60% of its food on a caloric basis, making it one of the world's largest food importers. A weakened agricultural sector could worsen this dependency, making Japan more vulnerable to global market fluctuations and supply chain disruptions. And lastly, the issue of temporary housing in Japan, particularly in earthquake-prone cities like Tokyo. Japan is located in the so-called Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped zone of high seismic and volcanic activity around the Pacific Ocean. It's home to about 75% of the world's active volcanoes and 90% of its earthquakes. This is because the Pacific Plate is constantly moving and subducting or sliding underneath other tectonic plates. This process creates friction and heat, which can lead to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. So it's a ticking time bomb when it comes to natural disasters. The Great East Japan earthquake in 2011 serves as a horrible reminder, having destroyed numerous homes and forcing around 120,000 people into prefabricated temporary housing. These temporary residences are not only socially isolating, but also potentially dangerous in the face of another disaster. A Mainichi Shimbun investigation revealed that 70% of temporary housing units were being used for longer than the 2-year limit set by law. As of late 2018, there were 22,549 temporary housing units across 40 of Japan's 47 prefectures. Of these, 15,662 had been in use for more than 2 years. The longest period of use was in Miyagi Prefecture, severely affected by the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, where temporary housing had been in use for nearly 8 years. This extended use of temporary housing raises concerns about their structural integrity and the safety of the residents, especially in earthquake-prone areas. The question that takes shape is, can Japan sustain this approach in the long run without causing irreversible damage to its economy and environment? The short answer is probably not. If Japan continues down this path, the country risks not only environmental degradation, but also economic instability. So what happens if Japan keeps going like this? Well, let's talk about the younger generation. They're growing up in a world where houses are like disposable cups. What does that teach them about value and permanence? According to a study, the young in Japan are already showing signs of disinterest in owning homes. This could lead to a future where renting becomes the norm, which might sound good for flexibility, but can be unstable for long-term planning like retirement. Then there's the issue of community bonds. In a society where houses are torn down every 30 years, neighborhoods don't have time to mature. The sense of community can get lost. A report suggests that this lack of community feeling can lead to social issues like increased crime rates and less care for public spaces. Another angle we haven't touched on is mental health. Constantly moving and not having a permanent home is stressful and can lead to mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Japan already has a high rate of mental health issues, and this could make it worse. And what about the job market? With people flocking to cities, there's a risk of job saturation. Too many people and not enough jobs can lead to unemployment or underemployment. This is especially concerning for younger people who are just starting their careers. Youth unemployment in Japan is already a concern, and this could increase the issue. Lastly, let's talk about cultural heritage. Japan has a rich history and many traditional styles of architecture. But if houses are being torn down so frequently, what happens to that heritage? According to a UNESCO report, many traditional Japanese houses are already at risk, and the current housing strategy could speed up their disappearance. So, as we've explored, Japan's current housing strategy seems to be on shaky ground in more ways than one. But here's an intriguing question to reflect on. What would Japan look like in a decade if it continues down this path?